Welcome to Fiction Audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. If you have any recommendations for novels, comment below.
Please join my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/fictionaudiobook.
Chapter 70, Hydra's Resurgence, Part. Link, p@trian.com/arson. 4 months later. Steve Rogers. It's been 2 years, he thought. 2 years since New York, 2 years since the world shifted on its axis, and 2 years since he had started working for S.H.I.E.L.D. This is what Peggy would have wanted, right? After the Battle of New York, Steve had accepted Fury's offer to join the agency upon learning that one of its founding members was Peggy Carter herself. He currently resided in Washington, D.C., attempting to adjust to the complexities of contemporary society. You heard anything from Park yet? His musing was broken by a voice coming from across the cockpit. He looked at Natasha as he answered. No, nothing, radio silence, as always. After what happened in Fairview, the entire world has been after him. He does realize, if he doesn't respond, he looks guilty, right? Natasha countered, and Steve had to silently agree with her assessment. Ethan has been spotted in Fairview Hospital on January 3, 2014, but due to his elusiveness when it comes to talking to authorities, some have started claiming he was the one who caused the disaster. 136 dead, Steve muttered. I just want to know what happened, and if it could have been prevented. Well, if all it takes for him to show up is a world-ending disaster, our paths will cross eventually, Natasha noted. They were currently in a Quinjet soaring over the Indian Ocean alongside S.H.I.E.L.D.'s counterterrorism STRIKE team, led by Agent Brock Rumlow. Their mission, to liberate hostages from a S.H.I.E.L.D. vessel seized by pirates. Listen up, Ops briefing, Rumlow's voice echoed across the jet, and they moved toward him with Captain Rogers in the lead. The target is the Lemurian Star, a mobile satellite launch platform. They were setting up their last payload when pirates took them 93 minutes ago, Rumlow explained, utilizing the digital mission screen. How many pirates? The captain asked. 25. Top-tier mercenaries led by this guy, George Batroc, Rumlow answered, glancing at Steve as he added the next part. This guy has a reputation for maximum casualties. Captain Rogers remained unbothered. All right, I'll sweep the deck and find Batroc. Nat, you kill the engines and wait for instructions. Rumlow, you sweep the craft, find the hostages, and get them to the life pods. Get them out, he ordered, moving toward the rear ramp. STRIKE, you heard the cap gear up. Rumlow announced. At the ramp, Captain tested the radio. Check Channel 7. Channel 7 secure, Natasha answered. Then, with a sly look, she asked, so, you do anything fun Saturday night? Well, all the guys from my barbershop quartet are dead, Steve replied flatly. So, no, not really. Coming up on the drop zone, Cap, Rumlow's voice crackled over Channel 7. Steve punched the button to open the hydraulic ramp. You know, if you asked Kirsten from statistics, she'd probably say yes, Natasha tried, playing the role of the persistent wingwoman. That's why I don't ask, the captain replied over the howling wind as he gripped his shield and reached the edge of the metal ramp. Too shy or too scared? Natasha questioned. Too busy, Cap replied simply, before diving into the void. Agent Jack Rollins approached from behind Rumlow, squinting into the dark. Was he wearing a parachute, he questioned, watching the captain plummet away from the jet. No, he wasn't, Rumlow replied, a mix of respect and disbelief in his voice. During the mission, Captain Rogers successfully neutralized Batroc, but he also discovered that Romanoff had a secondary, secret assignment from S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Fury had instructed her to extract encrypted data from the ship's computers, a task Rogers himself was entirely unaware of and found highly unethical. When Rogers confronted Fury about this secret assignment, the director finally informed him of the true nature of their operation, Project Insight. In summary, Project Insight is a classified initiative S.H.I.E.L.D. has been developing in secret for quite some time. Essentially, it involves a fleet of next-generation helicarriers linked by a sophisticated satellite network to detect and eliminate potential threats to global security before they even manifest, Fury had explained. But all Steve saw was a world at gunpoint, a world living in fear, not the one he and Peggy had fought for. To Steve, this wasn't freedom, this was fear. I thought punishment came after the crime, Steve had argued with Fury. Yet, he knew he was in no position to influence the decisions made by the World Security Council, at least, not yet. Nick Fury. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been compromised, he realized as he hauled himself through the sewers, barely surviving his encounter with the Winter Soldier. Rogers, he was right, damn it. I have to get to him, he muttered aloud as his legs finally gave out. He fell into the stagnant sewage water with a splash. I like this coat, he grunted, the pain finally catching up to him. Later that night. Fury sat in Steve's darkened apartment when his phone buzzed with a message from Agent 13. "Cap's on the way," it read. He leaned back against the sofa and turned the volume of the stereo up to the maximum, letting the melancholic brass of a familiar tune fill the room. "It's been a long, long time by Kitty Collin. Never thought that you would be standing here so close to me. There's so much I feel that I should say. But words can wait until some other day." Fury picked up the subtle movement of someone climbing in through the side window. Smart, he thought. Never enter through the front door when an intruder is waiting. Kiss me once, then kiss me twice. Then kiss me once again. It's been a long, long time. The music continued to play as the captain cleared the house, room by room, until he finally found Fury sitting in the shadows. The director informed him that S.H.I.E.L.D. had been compromised from within. But just as he was about to elaborate on the threat, the silence of the night was shattered. Bang. Bang. 2 high-velocity bullets tore through the living room wall, penetrating Fury's chest. He slumped forward, gasping for air. With his final ounce of strength, he pulled Steve close, pressed a flash drive into his palm, and whispered his last command. "Don't trust anyone." This was the same drive Natasha had retrieved, containing the encrypted data from the Lemurian Star, the digital proof that S.H.I.E.L.D. had been compromised by Hydra from the very beginning. The same drive whose data remained inaccessible for Fury. The Winter Soldier. He was currently standing on a decommissioned railway line that had been closed off by the city. The mission is complete, he thought. He had finally outrun that persistent tail, that shield-throwing man. He seemed familiar. Suddenly, he clutched his head as foreign memories came pouring in like a flood. A snowy mountain, a speeding train, him dangling over a freezing abyss, fighting for his life. Then came a phrase, "I'm with you till the end of the line." Following it was that same face, the man with the shield, but much smaller, scrawnier, and yet wearing that same stubborn expression. "What are these? What is going on?" he muttered aloud. Then, a voice emerged from his blind spot. "Those are your memories, Mr. Barnes." The voice spoke, and he turned sharply, a preset command overriding every other instinct in his body: "No witnesses." He lunged, but felt a sudden, violent jerk on his metal arm. He looked down to inspect the limb and froze in disbelief. "Need a hand?" the voice asked again, offering him his own cybernetic hand, the one that had just been surgically clean removed from his shoulder. Even after 70 years of systematic brainwashing, the sheer sarcasm of that statement didn't elude Bucky. Who the hell is Bucky? He thought, his brow furrowing in deep concentration. Wait, didn't this person just call me Barnes? He looked toward the origin of the voice as the flickering light of the abandoned railway finally illuminated the man. He looks young, Bucky thought, the name slipping into his mind without him even realizing it. Who sent you? S.H.I.E.L.D., he demanded. Oh, why? I sent myself, Ethan answered nonchalantly. But I have to say, I've been meaning to have this meeting for a while, Mr. Barnes. I guess now is as good a time as any. Bucky's hand drifted toward the combat knife in his side pocket, his eyes narrowing. Why do you keep calling me that? It's your name. Don't worry, you'll remember soon enough. Tora is working on it. I can't have you remembering everything in one go, or it'll fry your brain, Ethan explained. What the hell is he babbling about? Bucky questioned internally. Doesn't matter. No witnesses. As the thought finished, he lunged forward. However, a second later, the knife was swatted effortlessly from his hand, and Ethan already had a finger pressed firmly against his forehead. Sleep, Ethan whispered, inducing a gentle wave of cursed energy directly into his brain. Bucky fell unconscious, his body going completely lifeless. Ethan caught him, hoisting the super soldier over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. They really did a number on you, didn't they? Ethan remarked to the unresponsive Barnes, simply shaking his head in pity. The light flickered once and went dark. A second later, when the glow returned to the tunnel, both Ethan and Bucky had vanished. Captain Rogers. So, the secretary is involved in this conspiracy, he realized, watching the last of the STRIKE team board the elevator he was already on. He had arrived at the Triskelion headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. at the secretary request. Before we get started, does anyone want to get out? Steve stated calmly to an elevator packed with STRIKE agents. Oh, this gives me a weird sense of déjà vu, Rumlow muttered. Just as he finished, the STRIKE team lunged into the attack. Though they were initially able to immobilize the captain for a few frantic seconds, the tide turned decisively. One after another, Rogers neutralized the agents without lethal force, eventually leaving only Rumlow standing. Whoa, big guy. I just want you to know, Cap, this isn't, Rumlow swung his electrical baton wildly, personal. He managed to stun Rogers twice with the high-voltage weapon. However, after receiving the sealing treatment from the captain, Rumlow was finally sent crashing back down to the floor. It kind of feels personal, Rogers spoke, looking down at Rumlow's unconscious body. In the next moment, he kicked his shield upward with his heel, catching it expertly on his arm as it snapped back into place. With the elevator doors opening to a floor crawling with enemies, Captain Rogers made his daring escape by diving straight through the 20th floor glass window. After a harrowing landing, he drove away on his motorcycle, successfully disabling an attacking Quinjet before vanishing into the city. Secretary Pierce. He had just declared Captain Rogers, America's golden poster child, a fugitive to be neutralized by S.H.I.E.L.D. for withholding critical information regarding the director's death. As he stews in his office, contemplating the arrival of the new age of Hydra, with a smile on his face, he recalls the clandestine meeting he held with the other heads of the organization only 12 hours ago. 12 hours ago, in the meeting. Ethan Park is dead, Secretary Pierce declared proudly to a room full of 5 monitor screens, each displaying the shadowed silhouette of a respective Hydra head. A/N, so how was the chapter? Chapter 71, Hydra's Resurgence, Part. Link, p@trion.com/arson. 12 hours ago, in the meeting. Ethan Park is dead. It is time for the resurgence of Hydra, Secretary Pierce declared proudly to a room containing 5 monitor screens, each displaying the shadowed silhouette of a respective Hydra head. The 5 other leaders in the connection included General Hale, Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, Arnim Zola, Madame Hydra, Viper, and Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. Why should we believe you, Secretary? You have made promises before that have proven to be untrue, von Strucker spoke through one of the monitors. And if he is truly dead, where is the corpse? I would like to examine it myself. Questioning me and requesting my assistance in the same breath. Classic Strucker, Pierce thought. Who do you think I am, Strucker? I wouldn't call this meeting unless I had proof, Pierce countered. In that moment, a digital folder containing various photographs appeared on each of their screens. There is the evidence you requested. After a few minutes of silence examination, the silence was broken. You must forgive me, Secretary, for doubting you. After all, this is no longer a world of spies, it is not even a world of heroes. This is the age of miracles, von Strucker said, analyzing the files in front of him. There is nothing more horrifying than a miracle, and Ethan Park is the most horrifying miracle of the modern age. Poisoning. You brought Park down with a poison. General Hale asked, as she was intimately aware of Ethan's capabilities. Is he not known to cure illnesses that are otherwise incurable? Not just any poison, General Hale, Pierce said, producing a glass tube containing a glowing green liquid. You have Viper to thank for this miracle. He looked toward the Baron as he emphasized the final word. You flatter me, Secretary Pierce, Viper replied, her left hand covering her mouth. Allow me to be the one to introduce this toxin. The stage is yours, Ophelia, Pierce replied in the same breath. Heh. That, Ophelia said, pointing toward the glass tube containing the green liquid, is the deadliest poison known to mankind, and currently the most lethal weapon in Hydra's arsenal. Its name is the bubonic plague. You crazy woman. Bubonic plague, von Strucker immediately questioned, alarmed at the potential repercussions. Why weren't we told about this sooner? Let her continue, Baron, Pierce interjected. Ahem. The original bubonic plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis and transmitted by fleas or rodents, is one of history's deadliest diseases. It was responsible for pandemics like the 14th century catastrophe famously known as the Black Death, Viper continued. I was able to extract that bacterium and re-engineer it. This version of the bubonic plague is far more lethal than the original, capable of wiping out the entirety of humanity if released to the public. What I have created is a nuclear deterrent for the coming age of Hydra. She finished, her eyes gleaming with the madness of a scientist. One drop of this is enough to kill hordes of elephants, and Park drank a glass. And Baron. She looked toward Strucker's monitor. Call me crazy one more time, and I will feed you your own intestines the next time we meet. Baron gulped but did not answer. It was better to have 100 smart enemies than one crazy one. Seeing the tension rising, the green screen figure of Arnim Zola flickered. No need for such bruteness, Miss Viper. After all, Hydra was founded on the belief that humanity could not be trusted with its own freedom. What we did not realize was that if you try to take that freedom, they resist. The war taught us much. Humanity needed to surrender its freedom willingly, and they have. Project Insight is within our grasp, your creation will go a long way toward protecting that rule, Zola explained. But when one is on the verge of victory, they must look back to their origins so as not to forget who they were, who they are, and who they can be, Zola finished. We are the last remaining heads of HYDRA. Everyone else has been brutally murdered. And except for Pierce, none of you would be in the positions you are right now if not for the process of elimination. Silence followed that declaration. Everyone in the meeting knew exactly what Dr. Zola was referring to, the systematic purge of Hydra's forces that began in May of 2008. Every Hydra facility outside of the US has been decimated. Previous leaders of each cell were murdered mercilessly, some crushed to death, others falling from abandoned buildings. Hell, Malik was drowned. It became so dire that Hydra was effectively on its last legs, that is the Shield and the US government at work, Zola finished. But that purge stopped after the destroyer attack in New Mexico. And now, the very cause of that purge is dead. The very process of elimination, Ethan Park, is dead. The age of Hydra is within our grasp. It is a time for celebration, but also for remembrance. So, let us remember our roots, for we are nothing without them. Hell no, we aren't still doing that tradition thing, are we? Von Strucker asked with a heavy sigh. Be more respectful, Baron. May I remind you that it was your grandfather who started this tradition? Pierce interjected. And it's the perfect opportunity to introduce yourself to latest addition to our ranks. He looked towards Valentine as he finished. Let's start with you then, Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, one of Hydra's current leaders and grandson of Reed Wolfgang von Strucker, a founding member of Hydra. Zola began, initiating the Baron's introduction. You trained alongside General Hale here at the HYDRA Preparatory Academy, passing all tests and becoming a personal student of the late Dr. Daniel Whitehall. Currently, you are overseeing the beginning of the Project Destroyer of Worlds. Using gravitonium, if I am not mistaken, Dr. List, one of your subordinate have found success in that regard, the absorbing man, as you call him. Zola finished, receiving only a grunt of agreement from the Baron. You were a sleeper agent within S.H.I.E.L.D., recruiting soldiers for Hydra's cause from those who became unsatisfied with the way the agency was led. For all of that, you have our thanks. Oh, do me next, Viper spoke in a giddy, dark tone. Ah. Ophelia Sarkissian. A ruthless executioner and a master of toxicology. Your preferred aliases, Viper, Madam Hydra, are synonymous with world-class terrorism. Every endeavor you undertake results in casualties by the thousands. If you permit my assessment, your finest achievement remains the assassination of the President of Liechtenstein. Zola finished, and the room seemed to be in agreement. Born in a war-torn province of Europe during the Great War, you were scarred in both physique and spirit by violence from a tender age. Yet, you did not succumb, you forged your indignation into a weapon as a recruit of Hydra. A total embrace of nihilism as your core ideology. Have I omitted any pertinent details, Fräulein Ophelia? Zola asked, just in case. No, you got it all. I grew up to despise corporations and government institutions, making my life's goal to bring about their end. And it is here. My goal is reached with Project Insight, Viper added. Death, welcome and well-deserved. For all your service, you have our gratitude, Zola spoke. Zola looked beside Viper to where General Hale's monitor was. Brigadier General R. Hale. You stand as the sole high-ranking officer of the United States Air Force within our glorious order. You are held in high esteem for it. A leader of Hydra who was tasked by the late Daniel Whitehall to provide the lineage for our future leadership. Not only have you endured the purges, but you hold the distinct honor of raising the next head of Hydra, Ruby Hale. Hale looked visibly uncomfortable at the mention of her daughter, but she hid it well. For all your service, you have our gratitude, Zola finished. And the latest addition to our ranks, Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, a noblewoman of Italian descent. Former chairwoman of OXE and the current deputy director of the CIA. I must offer my apologies, Madame Fontaine, for my dossier on your person is uncharacteristically thin, noting only your profound interest in the privatization of global security and the acquisition of influence within the American government. You have sought to conscript or engineer formidable individuals to serve as your enforcers, Zola added. Well, it's not surprising. I like to keep my interests private, but my belief in the Hydra cause is simple. Righteousness without power is just an opinion. I was brought up to believe that there's a good guy and a bad guy, but eventually, I came to realize that there's just a bad guy and a worse guy. And I'd rather be the worse guy who takes the win than the good guy who loses, Valentina added. Now that proper introductions are out of the way, it's time to assemble. I want you all, and all the forces under your command, here in Washington within 12 hours, Pierce finished. That command seemed to silence the room until the Baron broke it. What do you need all that firepower for? Won't the Hydra agents within S.H.I.E.L.D. be more than enough, he asked. Not to mention the risk of exposure. Something I really want to avoid, Valentina added. To answer your first point, Baron, yes, I have enough men to ensure those third-generation helicarriers make it to the sky. But that's it. I have called all Hydra personnel within S.H.I.E.L.D. to Washington as well, Pierce answered. So, what do you need us for? General Hale added. Because tomorrow, Hydra will not only rule the sky, but we will take over the capital. Washington will be our staging ground, Pierce declared. Yes, it's ambitious, that's why your assistance will be paramount. And as for exposure, Miss Valentina, you cannot have only one foot through the door that is Hydra. You are either in, or you are dead, Pierce finished, looking around. I expect all of you and all your men-at-arms to be present tomorrow in Washington for Hydra's resurgence. If not, you will be declared a traitor to the Hydra cause and hunted down. Whoa, whoa, whoa. No need to go all bulldog on us. I will be there with a bottle of the finest quality wine, Baron interjected, both hands raised. Yeah, we will be there, General Hale added. Miss Valentina? Pierce questioned. I will be there, Valentina answered. Though her voice was strained, her instinct told her this was a bad idea. She knew that if she didn't comply, she would be hunted down. See you all tomorrow. Hail Hydra, Pierce finished. Hail Hydra, every other member of the group returned the greeting as the monitors shut off and the lights returned to the room. Silence reclaimed the space until another presence made itself known. The entity was grotesque, with several human skulls adorning its chest and a face resembling the barrel of a massive gun. This being looked orphically similar to the war curse that Ethan had exorcised when he stopped the 9/11 attacks. I did as you asked, God, all Hydra forces will be in Washington by tomorrow. But if I may, what happened to you? Where have you been all these years? Pierce asked, his back still turned to the towering figure. Am I suddenly required to keep you informed of all my actions, Secretary Pierce? I am a god, I do as I wish, the entity replied, its voice booming and vibrating through the walls of the room. But God, sir. I don't. Pierce tried to argue, his composure slipping. Silence, human. I expect all Hydra forces to be present upon my return, the entity commanded. Pierce gulped, his arrogance replaced by subservience. It will be done, it will be done. He mumbled, and the entity vanished. That was 12 hours ago. A/N, so how was the chapter? Chapter 72, Camp Lehigh and Talk with Zola. Link, p@trian.com/arson. Present day. Captain Rogers. Steve arrived at the hospital later that evening after his narrow escape from the Triskelion. He immediately noticed that the USB drive Fury had entrusted to him was gone, missing from its hiding spot behind the vending machine. That was when Natasha Romanoff appeared from the shadows. Steve lunged, jerking her into an adjacent room and demanding to know what she understood about the day's chaos, the Lemurian Star, the pirates Fury had supposedly hired, and the ambush. I only act like I know everything, Rogers, Natasha answered simply. Though she did know about the men who killed Fury. She revealed that most of the intelligence community didn't even believe the men who attacked Fury existed, those who did called him the Winter Soldier. She described him as a ghost, a legendary assassin she had encountered once before, leaving her with a scar and a haunting memory. Now, they were en route to an Apple store, hoping to bypass the encryption and access the valuable data on the USB. However, just as Fury had experienced, they found the files ghosted, locked behind a security protocol they couldn't break. Despite the dead end, they managed to trace the signal to the physical location where the program was originally authored. Rumlow and his strike team arrived shortly after, scouring the mall to intercept them. But with a calculated public display of affection, Natasha pulling Steve into a kiss to hide their faces, they managed to slip past the hunters and escape without further incident. A few hours later. Camp Lehigh, New Jersey. This camp is where I was trained, Steve said, observing the weathered environment. This is a dead end. 0 heat signatures, 0 waves, not even radio. Whoever encrypted the file must have used a router to throw people off, Natasha clarified. Steve looked toward an odd-looking building and started walking toward it. What is it? Natasha asked. Army regulations forbid storing ammunition within 500 yards of the barracks. This building is in the wrong place, Steve noted. Sure enough, the building seemed to be the very place where S.H.I.E.L.D. was founded. However, Steve noticed a distinct airflow coming through the gaps of a false wall. If you are already working in a secret office, why do you need to hide an elevator? He mused as he slid the wall aside. The elevator reached the bottom floor and hissed open. The room was illuminated by the malevolent red glow of molten metal, with a spotlight in the center of the room pointing toward an expensive-looking chair. Somebody's there, Natasha whispered from beside Steve, noticing a man reclining in the seat. Hey, Cap, the man spoke. He was wearing a sharp, two-piece black suit with a red tie. You're a few hours earlier than I expected, but oh well, all's well that ends well, I guess. Park, the captain said, his jaw tight. Asterisk, was Ethan working for Pierce? Was he also involved in this conspiracy? Asterisk. Steve and Natasha shared a worried glance. Natasha, however, was more confused than apprehensive. Has Park been screwing with us since New York, playing the hero, unless he and Pierce are in on this together? Natasha's brow furrowed. No. Definitely not. Park could kill every person in this country, all on his own if he really wanted to. There will be no need for all this commotion. Unlike the general public, Natasha, being a high-level S.H.I.E.L.D. operative, was acutely aware of Ethan's capabilities. But before she could fish for answers, a creak echoed from behind Ethan. They turned toward the source, and from the darkness stepped the Winter Soldier. She was certain of it, she could never forget those eyes. Bucky. Steve muttered, taking a subconscious step back. Hey, Steve, long time no see, bud, the Winter Soldier replied. Natasha looked toward the captain, her suspicions finally confirmed. Long time no see. How the hell are you alive? I saw you fall, Steve questioned, his voice cracking with emotion. Language, Ethan interjected. All three looked toward him as he simply raised his hands. What? It's not every day you get to correct Captain America on his manners, you just have to take the chance when you see it. What happened here? Natasha asked, her eyes scanning the room of molten computer parts and scorched circuitry. Oh, we are currently standing in the melted brain of an evil AI. To summarize, this is how it went down, Ethan spoke, and the scene shifted. 2 hours ago. Two figures could be seen stepping out of the elevator into the same sprawling room. Ethan and Bucky made their way inside. What is this place? Bucky asked, looking around the subterranean chamber. A supercomputer, probably the first one ever made to replicate the human brain, Ethan explained. He glanced at Bucky. You might remember the man responsible, he was the one who gave you that arm. Arnim Zola, Bucky said, his eyes widening at the mention of his former cybernetic limb. He looked down at his left arm, which was no longer cold metal, but warm flesh and blood. When he had woken up, it had regrown entirely, muscles, bones, nerves, veins, and arteries. That was the only way he could describe it. Bucky looked back at the strange man who had claimed to be friends with Steve. What are we doing here exactly? He asked. Well, technically, we're waiting for Captain Rogers to arrive, Ethan spoke as he began tweaking the hardware. Failing to understand the ancient mechanism, he grew visibly frustrated with the outdated tech. Ah, what the hell, Ethan declared. He produced a modern hard drive, the one he had received from Pierce himself, from his shadow and inserted it into the newly integrated USB port. That seemed to have done the trick, the lights in the room illuminated, and the old reels of the supercomputer started rotating once again with a mechanical hum. Hey, it worked. See. I am a genius, Ethan declared, looking at Bucky proudly. You didn't actually do anything, Bucky thought, deadpanning as he watched the display. Initiate system, the screen displaced. Bucky looked towards Ethan, just then a distortion in space passed through him, as if a mirror, that should do it, he heard Ethan mutter, as he typed, yes. Ethan turned towards him, huh? What's that face for? He began, but he was interrupted by the shifting screen of the main computer. Park. Ethan, born 1995, a sophisticated German-Swiss voice emanated from the machine. The screen flickered, revealing the pixelated, green face of Arnim Zola. Barnes. James, born 1917. You are supposed to be dead, her Park. How did you survive? Zola questioned. Was Pierce mistaken? Or did he betray the cause? Regardless, I must inform the others. Zola attempted to broadcast a signal outside of Camp Lehigh, but failed. A jammer capable of blocking me. No, this feels different. Trying to get a word out, are you, Dr. Zola? Ethan asked. It won't work. You see, we are in a separate dimension, the Mirror One, to be exact. As he finished, the room began to warp, a perfect reflection of the laboratory materialized across the ceiling. Neat trick, Bucky remarked, observing the folding environment. Realizing he couldn't send an external signal, Zola wasted no time and attempted to activate the Winter Soldier. Zelenai. Rzavi, Zola began, reciting the trigger words. These commands had been etched into Bucky's mind under Zola's direct supervision through brutal Pavlovian conditioning. Ah! Stop! Bucky screeched, clutching his head with both hands as if in physical agony. Semnat sat. Rasvit. Pesh, Zola continued nonetheless. Ethan watched from the periphery. He's fighting it better than I expected, he noted silently. Stop, damn it. Bucky shouted, launching himself toward the main console. He punched the monitor with all his might, shattering the glass on impact. However, the pixelated green face of Zola simply flickered onto a different terminal. Deviate. Dobroserdikny. Vozvrasheny na Rodinu, Zola's voice persisted. These Russian commands were meticulously designed to induce a state of total, mindless compliance. Odin. Tavarny Vagon, Zola finished. A brief, heavy silence followed. Ethan maintained a neutral expression, one hand slightly raised. It is still too soon for him to heal completely. Tora had released the suppressed memories the conditioning had buried, but the deep psychological scars left on Barnes's psyche would not be mended in a single day. Ready to comply, Bucky forced out through gritted teeth. But just as he finished, Kitsuna emerged from Ethan's shadow, and with a wave of cursed energy, the Winter Soldier stood frozen, immobilized. Thanks, lady, Ethan spoke as Kitsuna dissolved back in his shadow, then he turned, glaring at Zola's pixelated visage. That wasn't very nice. You. Speaking of Anstandigite, of niceties, her Park. The sun must have emerged from the west today, Zola replied, his digital voice crackling with a cold, superior rasp. After all, Park had hunted Hydra forces across planet with a passion. Just for the record, you are the dead Nazi robot here, Park spoke, clearly exasperated. Robot. Kindish. Please, I am not so primitive. As for being dead, look around you. I have never been more alive. In 1972, I received a terminal diagnosis. German science could not save my flesh, but my mind. That was a treasure worth preserving, stored on 200,000 feet of data banks. You are currently standing inside my Gehirn, my brain. Ah, I must say, I am actually impressed. The number of people who would go to the lengths you have gone for their goals, they could be counted on one hand. Ethan spoke at length, and he truly was impressed. Everyone else in Hydra seemed to want something for themselves, some craved power, while others were only in it for the money. Zola, on the other hand, desired only the resurgence of Hydra itself. You surrendered your very humanity for your cause. How many people can claim such a feat? Ethan finished. Are you consoling me, sorcerer? Zola spoke, his voice crackling with a cold, superior rasp. You think that just because you have found me on the back foot, Hydra can be defeated? Asterisk Neen. Neen, asterisk you cut off one head, and two more shall take its place. We are Hydra. We are unendlich, without end. As he finished, the main screen shifted. Self-destruct protocol activated. Self-destruct in 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As the countdown finished, the 200,000 feet of data banks began humming with surge of power, overloading upon themselves. Asterisk boom. 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 Boom, asterisk. Simultaneously, the data banks on all sides of the room started to implode. It is done. Zola's voice flickered through heavy distortion. Best case scenario, both of you die, here, in a fiery explosion, but even in the case you survive, you will get nothing out of me. Asterisk boom. 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 Boom, asterisk. There was silence for a moment, with Park standing calmly in front of Zola as explosions erupted around them, until the corner of Ethan's mouth curved upward. Ah. He began laughing. Comically, Bucky had just regained consciousness, and the first thing he saw was Ethan Park cackling as the world detonated around them. I didn't think you were capable of going this far, Arnim Zola. Ethan shouted over the thunderous, simultaneous explosions. Tell me. Zola spoke, his voice increasingly distorted. Why do you hunt us so relentlessly? Isn't it obvious? Ethan questioned back, looking directly into the terminal's flickering eye. Subject 3030. Seth, your elder twin, Zola replied. Hydra High Command had a similar theory. At the mention of Seth, Ethan's gaze sharpened. Yes, nobody should be allowed to take youth away from young people. Nobody. As he finished, his shadow shifted as new reversal, the giant worm Jormungandr, utilized its sand release to encase both Ethan and Bucky in a spherical sand defense wall against the incoming inferno. Asterisk boom. 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 Boom, asterisk. The scene cuts back to the captain and Natasha. Bucky shook his head with a faint, weary smile and moved towards Steve. He said he was your friend. Honestly, I didn't believe him, Bucky said, gesturing toward Ethan with his thumb. You have weird friends, Steve. I can hear you, you know, Ethan called out from across the room. He also said you would be here. Bucky stepped closer, and he and Steve collapsed into a long overdue hug. After a few seconds, asterisk clap. Clap, asterisk enough bromance, you too, Ethan said, standing up. It was past time you knew the truth, Captain. Steve gritted his teeth. How did Zola even get here? Invited, Ethan answered, casting a pointed look toward Natasha. Operation Paperclip. S.H.I.E.L.D. had its own version of it, Romanoff replied. Recruiting enemy scientists after the war, only Zola proved to be parasitic. S.H.I.E.L.D. always did have a unique ability to fuck themselves up, Ethan spoke without thinking. He immediately caught himself as he looked toward the captain. Don't say it. Don't you dare say it. Language, Steve let out a bitter, weary laugh. God fucking damn it. A/N, so how was the chapter? I recently watched season 5 of Stranger Things. I'm thinking of adding Stranger Things in this FIC. How many of you have watched it? Chapter 73, The Culling. Domain expansion, mandatory headcount. Link, p@trion.com/arson. Speaking of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury is alive, Ethan spoke, looking toward Steve and Bucky. As a look of realization crossed the captain's face, he asked, Did you bring him back? What? Bucky turned toward Steve, then toward Ethan, his brow furrowed in confusion. Oh, no, he faked his death, Ethan clarified, waving his right hand dismissively. They cut him open, I saw his heart stopped, Natasha added, while Steve simply shook his head in weary disbelief. Tora's hand emerged from the shadows, sparking a sling ring portal into existence right behind them. Then you should ask him how he did it, Ethan said, making his way through the glowing orange aperture. Natasha and Steve eyed the sling ring portal with deep suspicion. You should have seen the mirror dimension, Bucky remarked as he followed Ethan through the gateway. Lakeview Cemetery Dam, Cleveland, Ohio. Where are we, exactly? Captain Rogers asked, looking around the forested area and then up at the looming dam. We are in Cleveland, Captain, a top-secret, underground shield facility, to be exact. Ethan replied as the portal hissed shut behind them. Even I didn't know about this place. How did you? Natasha asked, her natural paranoia surfacing. Well, let's just say when our friendly neighborhood assassin over there was sent to cut Fury's life short. Ethan said, glancing at Bucky, I placed an extra set of precautions, just in case. He added this as he dropped to one knee and began petting something unseen. Tora, sensing his intentions, already had his hands encased in shimmering, rotating eldritch magic circles. The spell he cast created a distinct area of effect, anyone caught within its radius would be granted the temporary ability to perceive cursed energy. Tora rotated his wrists, and everyone in the immediate vicinity suffered from distorted, foggy vision. As it cleared, they found Ethan hunched over a small doe that hadn't been there a moment before. Meet my chimera, Samsara. She heals. Ethan said. The chimera walked toward the other three and offered her paw, one by one, a gesture they each reciprocated. Thank you for your service, the captain added as he shook her paw. Samsara cooed in response. Huh, she likes you lot, Ethan noted with a genuine smile. Just then, the front gate of the dam slammed open, and out stepped Fury, Coulson, and Maria Hill. Speaking of the devil, Fury said, looking at Ethan before shifting his gaze toward the others in the group, the captain, Romanoff, and finally, Bucky. Get inside, he commanded, looking around cautiously before walking back into the facility. The captain and the group made their way inside, with Ethan following closely behind. He and Coulson came face to face. You knew, Coulson said simply. Knew what, Agent? Ethan fired back. Coulson released a bitter laugh. Don't play games with me, Park. You knew. You knew Hydra had been hiding inside S.H.I.E.L.D. since our very first meeting. You said you will save us from ourselves, you also knew Garrett was Hydra. What else? Did you shoot his jet out of the sky, too? I did no such thing, Ethan said seriously, passing by Coulson. Then, from a short distance, he added, I did give Garrett supercancer, though. Hee. Coulson and Maria exchanged a resigned, weary look. Maria, walking beside Romanoff, questioned. How did you guys find this location? To answer that, Natasha simply looked at Ethan and Hill nodded. Inside the facility, all members of Coulson's team were present, May, Skye, Fitz, Simmons, and Ward. Fury released a heavy breath. Lacerated spinal column, cracked sternum, shattered collarbone, perforated liver, and one hell of a headache, he listed off. Don't forget your collapsed lungs, Dr. Hans added. Yeah, let's not forget those. I am completely healed now. Thanks for that, I guess, Fury said, looking down at the doe standing by Ethan's legs. Samsara took a step back, hiding behind Ethan. She doesn't like you, Ethan declared bluntly. I don't blame her, the captain added, looking at Fury with clear frustration. How did you pull it off? Natasha questioned. Tetrodotoxin B slows the pulse to 1 beat per minute. Banner developed it for stress, didn't work so great for him, but we found a use for it, Fury explained. Why all the secrecy? Why not just tell us, the captain asked. Any attempt on the director's life had to look successful, Hill added. Besides, we weren't sure who to trust, Coulson added. About that, there is something you should know, Ethan said, glancing toward Bucky. After explaining everything that had transpired with Zola and the full scope of Hydra's resurgence to Fury and the others, the room fell into a heavy silence. Captain Rogers, Bucky, Natasha, Park, Coulson's team, Fury, Hill, and Dr. Hans all stood around an old, battered metal table. So, let me get this straight. Park has been hunting Hydra since 2008, before any of us even knew they survived the war. Which, by the way, was before you were even an adult, Fury started, his single eye fixed on Ethan, still looking at him. Fury pointed towards Barnes. And to top it all off, the Winter Soldier, the assassin who has terrorized world governments for 70 years, is on our side now. Everything just starts falling into places whenever you are around. Why is that? We all have questions, Nick, the captain said firmly. But I think Park can be trusted. Me too, sir. His past actions speak for themselves. Besides, the fact that we weren't all dead the moment Ethan located us is proof enough that he isn't working with Pierce, Coulson added. Sky and Fitz nodded vehemently in agreement. Fury released a heavy breath and walked toward a cabinet on the left wall, retrieving a weathered folder. From it, he pulled an old photograph of Alexander Pierce. He studied the image for a moment before looking back at the group. This man declined the Nobel Peace Prize, Fury said, waving the picture. He said peace wasn't an achievement, it was a responsibility. See, stuff like this gives me trust issues. I don't think the council is accepting my calls anymore, he added, before nodding toward Hill. We need to bring down those carriers before they reach 3,000 feet, Hill clarified, stepping forward. Once they hit that altitude, they will triangulate with the InSight satellites and become fully weaponized. How do we do that? Ward asked, his expression unreadable. Coulson, Fury, and Hill exchanged worried glances. We received word from the team we sent to retrieve the targeting chips from the hub, Hill admitted, looking toward Fury. Apparently, Pierce has activated the isolation protocol. Only Alpha-level operatives can now bypass the facility's automated security, Fury added. The isolation protocol is S.H.I.E.L.D.'s ultimate scorched earth security measure. Once triggered, the hub's internal systems, including the automated point defense turrets and the vacuum-sealed targeting vaults, ignore all standard commands. They default to a biometric deadlock that requires a physical presence to override. And only Director Fury and Secretary Pierce are Alpha-level authorized, Coulson clarified. Wouldn't locking you out be the first thing Pierce does? Natasha asked, her arms crossed. He would certainly try, but I have backups in place for exactly such a scenario, Fury said, reaching up and slowly removing his eye patch. However, the moment I am spotted anywhere near Washington, Pierce will call in a drone strike. That's not all, Hill continued. Presumably, Hydra cells from all over the US have been converging on Washington over the last 12 hours. Pierce wants a stage, Steve realized, his expression darkening. Once those helicarriers are in the sky, he will make Washington his home base. He is going to seize the capital. Shoo, how should I put it? Ethan finally spoke aloud from beside Bucky, pressing a finger to his forehead in deep thought. What the hell, here goes nothing. The calling of all Hydra cells in Washington, Pierce was following my orders, he finally declared. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence until Fury broke it with a roar, leveling a micro Uzi directly at Ethan's chest. I knew it. You Nazi motherfucker. Clearly, there was a better way to put that, Ethan muttered, looking around at the hostile faces in the group. Clarify. And do it fast, Steve said, his grip tightening on the edge of his shield. Ethan simply pointed ahead. To be precise, Pierce has been following his orders. From Ethan's shadow, Kitsuna manifested the towering, grotesque form of the war curse behind the group. Ethan then proceeded to explain the twisted relationship between the war curse and Pierce, and how he had manipulated the connection to force every active Hydra cell to assemble in Washington. Wait, I don't understand. Why give Hydra such an advantage? They have the superior numbers in the capital now, Fitz asked immediately. Simmons nodded in frantic agreement. May looked toward Fitz and simply shook her head as a look of realization finally passed over his face. Oh, it's a culling, he whispered, looking at Simmons as he added the last part. Park means to kill every Hydra agent. So he gathered them in one place, Washington, D.C. Simmons gulped involuntarily. And they are coming, like sheep to the slaughter. A heavy silence followed the proclamation in the underground facility. Nobody openly disagreed with the method, after all, it was the most effective way to excise the cancer that was Hydra. No moral dilemmas were raised about taking lives, everyone in the room had taken a life, whether directly or indirectly. In fact, some were even impressed by the sheer scale of the planning. Fury looked at Ethan, thinking, what did they do to you that made you hate them this much? Then he looked at the photograph of Alexander Pierce in his hand. Whatever you did, Pierce, you fucked up in the worst possible way. Ethan, I'll admit your plan is effective, but, Steve began, but Ethan interrupted him. As Machiavelli wrote, therefore, all injuries ought to be done together, so that, being tasted less, they will offend less, Ethan quoted. The prince, Sky added, recognizing the line. Ethan looked at Sky, shook his head, and spoke solemnly. What I'm doing, it's probably not the right way to do it. But when I started down this path, this was always how it was going to end. Besides, Captain, these are not simply people making bad decisions, these people intent on killing 20 million innocent civilians by the end of today. Ethan then turned toward Steve, his wide, neutral gaze breaking into a genuine smile. Though, I might need some help. You'll have it, Steve said, a look of grim determination settling over his face. So, here's the plan. Ethan began. 20 minutes later. Outside Lakeview Cemetery Dam. Ethan could be seen standing in front of a sturdy tree, whistling as he relieved himself. Once finished, he washed his hands using water summoned from Mac's elephant and dried them with the searing heat of Suzaku's flames. As he emerged from the woods, in the distance, he spotted Captain America's shield resting on a rock beside the open dam. He continued whistling as he approached. Rogers looked back, then returned his gaze to the water. A comfortable silence stretched between them as Rogers watched the rushing current. "There are no fishes in this water," Rogers said, breaking the quiet. "Yeah, though the lake nearby is contaminated by industrial waste. The canal has become hazardous as a result," Ethan remarked. "It would take me days just to clear the surface waste," he thought immediately. Steve sighed heavily. "Your friend seems to be adapting well," Ethan added, nodding toward the front entrance where Bucky could be seen talking to Skye. "He was always better with female company than I was," Steve remarked with a small smile. "I almost didn't miss that part of him." Ethan reached out and touched the vibranium surface of the shield. Then, he turned away and began heading back into the dam. "We leave in 10 minutes, Captain. You should practice a few shield throws," Ethan said, his back turned to Rogers. "Trust me. You're going to need the practice." He looked over his shoulder at Rogers as he added that last part. "What?" Steve thought, looking down at his weapon. The shield had changed its original red, white, and blue color scheme to completely black and white. The tones were noticeably darker and more intense. He picked it up, aimed at the dense forest ahead, and flicked the shield toward the swamp, expecting it to bounce back as usual. Asterisk thud. 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 Thud, asterisk. It didn't bounce. The shield tore through 3 thick trees, bisecting them as cleanly as a laser, before embedding itself deep into a 4th. A beat later, the first 3 trees groaned and toppled over simultaneously. "Holy shit," Steve breathed. Ethan had imbued the shield with Mac's elephant, similar to the playful cloud. Any physical strike by the shield is amplified according to user's own strength. A/N. So how was the chapter? Chapter 74, The Battle of Washington, Part. Cursed speech medical symbol, comment below. Link, p@trian.com/arson. Triskelion, Shield Headquarters. 26th floor, Command Room. Agent Vic and Justin were continuing their work when a piercing, high-frequency sound suddenly tore through their headsets. "Aha," both men cried out, wincing in unison as they removed the headphones from their ears. "Must be the disc," Justin groaned, squinting to examine the data feed on his console. "I'll check it out," Vic replied. He moved toward the heavy, reinforced door and swiped his keycard to disengage the lock. To his shock, he found the twin barrels of 2 handguns pointed directly at his chest the moment the door hissed open, with Captain America standing right behind them. "Excuse us," the captain said firmly as he made his way inside, flanked by his team. This specific room housed the master override for the public address system, a terminal connected to every transmission network within the Triskelion. "This is going to work, right?" Bucky asked, as he and Agent Hill flanked the captain. "It will," Rogers replied as he turned up the mic. "It has to," he murmured. "Back in the dam asterisk. So, your master plan involves Steve invoking patriotism in the SHIELD agents?" Bucky had questioned after listening to Ethan's explanation. "I wouldn't use the word patriotism. All I need is a sense of response, of intent. Either negative or positive," Ethan clarified. "And what would that accomplish?" Hill asked, her eyes narrowing. "Well, you see," Ethan said, pointing his index finger toward her. A ball of steaming liquid materialized in front of it, and before anyone could react, the ball condensed into a pressurized stream and launched itself toward Agent Hill's face. "Shish. It's the auto-selection of targets for jujitsu techniques," Ethan said calmly. The stream of water had diverted from its original path at the last microsecond, cutting into the wall behind Hill instead of her. "I have automated what I used to do manually. This will allow me to strike targets not even in my line of sight, guided by their intent alone," Ethan clarified. In the command room asterisk. "Attention all SHIELD agents." The captain began. "This is Steve Rogers. You have heard a lot about me over the last few days." Agents in the main lobby stood at attention at the sound of his voice. "Some of you were even ordered to hunt me down, but I think it's time you knew the truth." Agents in the launch center paused their work. Agent 13, Sharon Carter, looked visibly relieved. "SHIELD is not what we thought it was. It has been taken over by Hydra. Alexander Pierce is their leader." Pierce stood among the World Security Council, frantically working his phone to call in his strike team to cut off the transmission. "The strike and insight crews are Hydra as well. We don't know how many more. I know they are in the building, they could be standing right next to you." Specialist Cameron Klein, the man responsible for launching the helicarriers, looked around at his colleagues at the captain's words. "They almost have what they want, absolute control. They shot Nick Fury, and it won't end there. If you launch those helicarriers today, Hydra will be able to kill anyone who stands in their way, unless we stop them. I know I am asking a lot, but the price of freedom is high. It always has been. Bucky and Hill looked at each other, hanging on the captain's every word. It's a price I am willing to pay. And if I am the only one, so be it. But I'm willing to bet I'm not. Then his tone changed, no longer asking, but commanding. There is no point in standing around. Hydra is here. Agent Rumlow and the strike team received an urgent transmission from Secretary Pierce. Half of them moved toward the secretary's office, while the other half surged toward the launch room. Ready yourselves, SHIELD agents. Some of you won't make it past today. I know you are scared, I am too. Everything you thought had meaning, every hope, dream, or moment of happiness. Steve paused, his eyes meeting Bucky's. None of it matters as you lie bleeding out on the battlefield. None of it changes what a bullet does to a body. We all die. Rumlow and his half of the strike team entered the launch room as the captain's speech echoed in the background. Rumlow approached the specialist in charge, Cameron Klein. Re-enter the launch sequence. Send those ships up, now. At his words, Klein looked back at Rumlow, visibly terrified. But does that mean our lives are meaningless? Does that mean there was no point in our being born? Would you say that about your slain brothers in arms? What about their lives, were they meaningless? Roger's voice continued over the transmission network. Is there a problem? Rumlow asked Klein, gritting his teeth at Roger's words. Is there a problem, he shouted again. As if in response, Roger shouted back. They were not. Their memory serves as an example to us all. The courageous fallen, the anguished fallen. Their lives have meaning because we, the living, refuse to forget them. And as we march to certain death, we trust our successors to do the same for us. At the captain's words, Klein seemed to find his courage. No, sir. I'm not going to launch those ships. Captain's orders. Rumlow unholstered his weapon and pointed it at Klein's head. Move away from the station. Because SHIELD agents do not buckle or yield when faced with the cruelty of this world. Agent Sharon Carter stepped to Rumlow's side, training her own gun on his temple. Like he said. Captain's orders. Following her lead, Hydra and SHIELD agents throughout the launch room leveled their weapons at one another. SHIELD agents, push forward. You picked the wrong side, Agent, Rumlow said, his gun still fixed on Klein. Depends on where you're standing, Carter replied, her stance undeterred. Bucky and Rogers could be seen dismantling a platoon of the strike team sent to sever the transmission, holding his shield in one hand and the microphone in the other. SHIELD agents, scream out. Ironically, the launch room was momentarily silent. Rumlow dropped his gun and reached for his tactical knife instead. SHIELD agents, rage. In a lethal display of knife skills, Rumlow moved with blurring speed and sliced open Agent Carter's hand, causing her to lose her grip on the gun. He caught it midair, and at that moment, all hell broke loose. Asterisk bang. 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 Bang, asterisk. Rumlow tried to blow Klein's head off, but Agent Carter interjected at the last possible second, shoving the technician out of the line of fire. Asterisk bang. 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 Bang, asterisk. The firefight raged in the background as Rumlow scrambled to the console, typing in the launch sequence override himself. After completing the task, he fired several warning shots to cover his escape, but his eyes locked onto Agent Carter, lying on the ground without a weapon. Carter, he shouted from behind a desk, his voice rising over the thunderous gunshots. I've wanted to do this for a long time. He stood up, taking deliberate aim at her head. I told you, Agent, you picked the wrong side. Just as he finished his sentence, his hearing picked up a sharp, piercing hissing noise. Suddenly, what appeared to be an unwavering line of water sliced through the reinforced concrete wall and shot through Rumlow's head, piercing it cleanly. Asterisk a laser beam. Asterisk Sharon thought, watching in awe as the shimmering line swept through the room, cutting through every remaining Hydra operative with surgical precision. Ah. Ack. Ag. They fell one by one, neutralized before they could even pull their triggers. Sharon reached out, touching the damp floor where Rumlow's body lay. Water, she spoke aloud, her voice steady, despite her bleeding hand. She turned toward Klein, who was staring at the cut in the wall. It's the same attack that took down the Chitauri Leviathan, Klein commented, his eyes wide as he looked at her. Ethan Park is here. Outside the Triskelion asterisk. One of the guards, Andrew, spotted an odd figure standing before the Triskelion. Asterisk another wandering tourist. Damn, I hate this job, asterisk he sighed inwardly. He'd been demoted after being caught playing Galaga on duty for the second time. Sir, you can't take pictures here. You are trespassing on a government facility. If you don't leave, I'll have to detain you, he spoke, not even bothering to look at the figure's face. A few seconds passed. Damn it, he's still here. Well, buddy, I gave you a chance. You're coming with me now, he said, moving closer. As he did, he got a clearer look at the figure's face. Ethan Park, he muttered in sudden realization, his eyes darting to a hovering orb of water held in the young man's hand. Ethan clasped his hands together and looked directly at Andrew. Stay back, or you're dying. Ethan wasn't exaggerating. When he uses water piercing, a sonic boom is produced as the stream travels faster than the speed of sound, creating a visible distortion in the air around the jet. When the stream of water breaks the sound barrier, it creates a shock wave. If one is standing close enough to the origin of that wave, the physical impact on the normal human body is comparable to being near a high explosive detonation. In other words, instant death. Andrew didn't need to be told twice. He didn't run inside for backup, he bolted for the perimeter fence. I am not getting paid enough for this shit, he shouted from a distance. Ethan looked ahead at the towering form of the Triskelion building and chanted softly, water piercing. Asterisk slitch. Slitch, asterisk. A single stream of water shot out from his palms, instantly diverging into 24 highly pressurized water jets that sliced through the structural concrete of the headquarters. Inside the Triskelion, 4th floor. Agent Gonzalez, a level 7 shield agent, and his entire team were pinned down behind a collapsed server rack. Asterisk bang. 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 Bang, asterisk. Sir, I'm out of ammo, his second-in-command shouted over the roar of gunfire. Me too, sir. Agent 15 added desperately. I'm on my last mag, Gonzalez gritted out. Asterisk bang. Bang. Bang, asterisk. The suppressive fire from the opposite end of the hallway was relentless. Gonzalez took a risky peek and emptied his barrel, catching a glimpse of their attacker. Damn. I know that guy. We once had a sandwich together. A sandwich? Agent 15 questioned, baffled by the timing. Yeah. He hates pickles, Gonzalez answered. Suddenly, the air was filled with a sharp, high-pitched hissing noise, and the gunfire stopped abruptly. After a few minutes of heavy silence, Agent Gonzalez and his unit cautiously made their way from behind the server rack. Connor spotted the pierced body of the Hydra agent and studied it from a distance. Well, there's a lesson learned, never trust a guy who doesn't like pickles, Gonzalez remarked after examining the corpse. His second-in-command nodded in silent agreement, though Agent 15 looked visibly conflicted. I don't like pickles either, sir, he finally confessed in a low, uncertain voice. What? Gonzalez barked, not quite catching the admission. What killed him, sir? Agent 15 asked, immediately changing the subject to hide his concern. Something pierced him clean, cut the wall behind him, too, Gonzalez noted, inspecting the deep, cauterized-looking gash in the reinforced concrete. I heard a hissing noise a moment before the attack. I did, too. Me, too, the others added in unison. Take whatever ammo you can, and let's get to the main lobby and kill some Nazis. Captain's orders, Gonzalez said, a smile spreading across his face as he checked his sidearm. A/N, so how was the chapter? Chapter 75, The Battle of Washington, Part. .. Link, p@trian.com/arson. Alexander Pierce. Let me ask you a question. What if Pakistan marched into Mumbai tomorrow? What if you knew they were going to drag your daughter into a soccer stadium for execution? He handed Councilman Singh a glass of champagne, and what if you could stop it with the flick of a switch? Would you? Wouldn't you all? Not if it was your switch, Councilman Singh replied, contemptuously throwing the glass aside. Asterisk crunch. Crunch, asterisk. Pierce smiled thinly. There is always a need for an open display of killing to solidify the fear of Hydra in their hearts, he thought, raising his weapon and pointing it directly at the councilman. However, in the very next moment, Councilman Singh was violently kicked out of the way by Councilwoman Hawley. She charged forward with predatory grace, disarming Pierce, backhanding him across the face, and electrocuting another nearby agent in one swift, fluid motion. Seizing Pierce's own gun, she neutralized the other 2 Hydra agents in the room within seconds. She then leveled the weapon back at Pierce's chest, reaching up to peel the holographic mask from the side of her face. I'm sorry, did I step on your moment? Natasha asked, revealing her true identity as the disguise dissolved. Keeping her weapon trained on the men, she moved toward an active terminal. What is she doing? Councilman Singh asked, his voice tight with confusion. She is uploading all SHIELD data onto the internet. Pierce replied, his expression darkening. And Hydras, she added firmly as she finalized the command. The encryption lock appeared on the main screen of the room, glowing a defiant red. Pierce side-eyed her, a smirk playing on his lips. Disabling that encryption is an executive order. It requires the biometric clearance of 2 Alpha-level members. Don't worry, company is coming, she replied calmly. A few seconds later, an orange portal sparked into existence in the center of the room, directly behind Councilman Singh. What the councilman muttered, stumbling back as he eyed the strange, swirling gateway. I could get used to this, Fury spoke, stepping through the portal and into the light. As he made his way inside, his single eye locked onto Pierce. Did you get new toys? Pierce asked, still eyeing the closing portal. I'm glad you're here, Nick. He added. Fury stepped toward Pierce. Really? Because I thought you had me killed. You know how the game works, Pierce immediately replied, meeting him eye to eye. So why make me director of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Fury questioned genuinely. Because you are the best and the most ruthless person I have ever met, Pierce countered. I did what I did to protect the people, Fury replied. Our enemies are your enemies now, Pierce tried persuading. Disorder, war, it's just a matter of time before a dirty bomb goes off in Moscow or an EMP fries Chicago. Diplomacy. A holding action. A band-aid. And you know where I learned that? Bogota. You didn't ask, you just did what had to be done. I can bring order to the lives of 7 billion people by sacrificing 20 million. It's the next step, Nick. Do you have the courage to take it? Pierce asked as he looked outside, his hearing picking up a noise that grew steadily stronger. No, I have the courage not to, Fury replied just as more Hydra guards burst through the main door. Pierce looked toward them as a ray of hope ignited within him. But before he could even speak, what seemed like a laser passed through the men, the door, and the reinforced walls behind them. The Hydra agents tried to take a few steps forward, but their torsos slid cleanly off their waists. Fury smiled, looking at Pierce as he added, new toys. Nah. More like a goddamn toy factory. Pierce moved toward the glass window and looked down at the Hydra camp that had been established in haste. He saw similar lasers piercing through his agents, only this time, the lasers numbered in the dozens. What is that? Pierce asked aloud, still staring out the window. Go on, smart guy. Take a guess, Fury replied. I have seen those attacks before, but that's impossible, Pierce thought, bringing a hand to his mouth. Asterisk, he told me Park was dead. He told me that, asterisk. Pierce gulped and looked at the 3 rising helicarriers. As some of his confidence returned, he turned back, regaining his composure. It doesn't matter. The helicarriers have already started their ascent. Nothing can stop them now. There is an army of Hydra agents in Washington inside those vessels, the largest assembly of our forces since the war. We have already won, Nick. Flashback, the dam. And if, despite all your planning, even one helicarrier completes its ascent to 3,000 feet, a lot of people are going to die. What do we do then? Fury had asked, having listened to Ethan's tactical breakdown for the Triskelion. If that happens, then I go with Plan B, Ethan answered simply. What is your Plan B? Bucky asked, helping Hill up from the ground where she had stumbled during Ethan's previous display of water piercing. Ethan merely looked toward them as the space behind him began to crack. The temperature in the room spiked instantly, and from the jagged rift, a single, massive eye opened. Present day, Pierce's office. After taking Pierce's biometric eye scan and successfully uploading every S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra file to the internet, the power dynamic in the room had shifted. Pierce and Fury stood by the window, watching the helicarriers continue their relentless ascent. Romanoff remained on standby, her weapon trained on the secretary, just as Captain Rogers, Bucky, and Maria Hill stepped through the freshly bisected door. That was a moving speech, Captain, Pierce remarked, side-eyeing Steve. He flinched visibly when he noticed the Winter Soldier was among them. I see you have reunited with your old friend. Are you ready for the new world order? Hydra's world order. You can still join us, you know. All of you can. Just say the words. Bucky immediately leveled his rifle at Pierce's head, but Steve held up a hand to stop him. Where is Park? Steve asked, his eyes scanning the room with growing concern. He should be here by now. Those ships are still going up, Natasha commented, casting a wary look out of the window. Meanwhile, Pierce's focus remained locked on Bucky. Do you remember your mission, soldier? He asked at last. Bucky, who still had his rifle leveled at the men, slowly lowered it. You have been loyal to the cause of Hydra, remember that, soldier, Pierce continued, his voice gaining a manipulative edge. Bucky moved toward him, not in obedience, but in silent fury, and backhanded the secretary. The force of the blow sent Pierce crashing against the glass, spiderwebbing the reinforced pane. Bucky approached the fallen man and hoisted him up by the neck, leaving his feet dangling helplessly in the air. Asterisk crack. Crack, asterisk. Then, with his newly healed hand, Bucky punched the glass, shattering it in a single strike. High-altitude winds immediately roared into the room, whipping around them with violent force. Seeing Pierce's state, Councilman Singh approached Fury. Shouldn't we stop him? He might kill Pierce. Fury spoke, his gaze fixed on Bucky. That's the Winter Soldier. Pierce had him doing his dirty work for years. You want to stop him, sing. Do it at your own risk. Ring. Just then, another presence made itself known among the group. If you throw him now, he will die thinking Hydra wins today, Ethan spoke from behind Bucky. Bucky turned, his eyes glassy and clouded with emotion. Ah. With a scream of defiance, he hurled Pierce back into the room. The secretary skidded across the floor, coming to a halt at Ethan's feet. Bucky moved back towards Steve, who pulled him into a silent hug. Meanwhile, Natasha looked out at the ascending helicarriers. Those ships have picked up speed. Time to enact Plan B, Park, Natasha spoke urgently. Ethan moved toward the jagged, broken window. Heh, not yet, he whispered, bringing his hands up in a slow, rhythmic clapping motion. Still not yet. His words lingered in the air. Clap, now. Pierce scrambled to his feet, trembling. You are supposed to be dead. Dead, he shouted, glaring at the cloudy sky. What have you done? Asterisk the helicarriers are still going up. He failed, asterisk Pierce thought, a manic look of glee appearing on his face. Ethan slowly turned around. When you have come this far, words are unnecessary. As he finished, the sky above Washington began to bleed a deep, volcanic orange. High above the skyline, the massive, coiled form of Ryujin, Ethan's wood dragon Shikigami, manifested. However, someone else was riding atop its head. Damn you, brat, making me use my ultimate technique for something this mundane. Jogo spoke in his signature snarl. His back was hunched as he leaned on his wooden cane, calmly observing the sprawl below. Through their mental link, Jogo sensed Ethan's amusement at his frustration. Gritting his teeth, he brought his hands together. Do not misunderstand it. This is not the power of your creation. As he spoke, the wood provided by Ryujin began to churn and ignite, condensing into a massive, molten meteor. Back in Pierce's office asterisk. Captain Rogers and Bucky stood by the left window, their gazes fixed on the massive meteor hovering above one of the three helicarriers. Natasha and Hill were beside them, staring at the celestial anomaly that had manifested out of the empty sky. Did you know he would do that? That he could do that? Hill asked the group in a hushed tone. The captain simply shook his head in disbelief. For a rare occasion, Natasha had nothing to add. Bucky, still staring out the window, finally spoke. He did say. Plan B involved something big. The atmosphere screamed as the meteor began its terminal descent. The air around the entirety of Washington heated in a heartbeat, turning the cool Potomac breeze into a searing gale. The meteor itself was physically smaller than the helicarrier it targeted, but to the Hydra agents on deck, it looked less like a projectile and more like the moon had decided to fall. Its surface was a roiling sea of magma and obsidian, casting a hellish glow over the entire DC skyline. There was no explosion at first, only a terrifying, muffled thud as the meteor's mass met the ship's repulsor engines. Then, the sound caught up. Asterisk boom. Boom. Boom, asterisk. A thunderclap so violent it shattered windows miles away and the city below followed. The central spine of the massive vessel snapped like a toothpick, and it began falling alongside the meteor. Heh, so that was your trump card, Pierce said, looking at Ethan before turning to Fury. I must say, I am disappointed, Nick. There are still 2 ships continuing their ascent. It is only a matter of time now. For the first time, Fury looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Ethan, who was still observing the increasingly reddening skyline. Everyone in the room felt the tension rising. Natasha looked at Park, wondering if that was truly the end of his play. It was an impressive feat, but ultimately ineffective. Then, her eyes caught something else in the clouds. Ethan pointed at the sky. There is still something you have to address, he shouted over the howling wind. What about the other 5? As he spoke, 5 more massive meteors, each one larger than the last, began falling toward the remaining helicarriers. Steve, sensing the impending danger, moved toward Ethan. Park. If those meteors hit the water, there will be a tsunami that swallows the coastline along the Potomac. I'm on it, Ethan replied, raising his right hand. Emerge from the darkness, blacker than darkness. Purify that which is impure, he chanted as a curtain deployed around the impact point. From the outside, it looked like a black, dome-shaped bubble with a yellowish tint, a dark, hazy sphere of energy. This was a specialized curtain Ethan had developed himself following the Delgur incident of 2004. This curtain functioned like a domain expansion on a massive scale. Unlike normal semicircular curtains, this was a complete sphere. Through a binding vow, the toughness of the interior and exterior was reversed, making the interior strong enough to contain the immense pressure of the displaced water and the kinetic impact. A/N, so how was the chapter? How many of you guys have watched? From TV show. I don't remember the name, but a reader recommended stating. The story will fit right in with logic of JJK curses. Only started the first season, but goddamn was he right, I already have a storyline in place. It's about damn time I write something with Stark and Ethan, and if I do it, then this arc will be the one. Chapter 76, Consequences, Part. Link, p@trian.com/arson. The curtain Ethan manifested surged forward, sealing the entirety of the impact zone within its obsidian walls. With the meteors mere seconds away from striking the water, the inevitable aftershock of the initial collision resonated outward. The first atmospheric wave escaped the barrier's boundary by a fraction of a second, hurtling toward the Triskelion. In Pierce's office asterisk. The shockwave shattered the already weakened reinforced glass windows. Captain Rogers brought his shield up instantly, shielding both himself and Natasha. Bucky, acting on instinct, used his right arm to provide a wall for himself and Maria Hill. Fury and the councilman ducked, shielding their heads. But just as the jagged shards were about to pierce them, they stopped. The glass floated in midair, suspended by an invisible gravitational force of gravity sheep Ares. The group looked up, when the expected impact never landed. Outside, the curtain on the river had completely materialized, a perfect, light-eating sphere. Ethan turned back toward the room, his gaze fixing on the crawling leader of Hydra. "Look at me," he pronounced. "Look at me, Pierce." The shards of glass collapsed back on the floor, shattering. At his command, Pierce's eyes darted toward Fury, seeking some semblance of the world he understood. "Don't look at him. Look at me," Ethan repeated. His tone shifted, carrying a weight that made the others in the room watch him warily. Finally, Pierce's head snapped in his direction. "You should be dead. He told me you were dead." At that, Ethan looked strangely content. "I want to thank you, Pierce," he began, immediately drawing confused stares from everyone in the room. Captain Rogers looked bewildered by the direction the conversation was taking. Bucky was in a similar state of disbelief. Natasha, however, kept her eyes locked on Ethan. He just killed thousands of Hydra agents, she thought. "Really, it's not often I get to cut loose like this," Ethan continued. "Usually, there are so many mission parameters, so many things, not to destroy. But not this time. Thanks to you, I didn't have to hold back. But this is it, Pierce. This is as far as you go. You are the last head. The last remaining head of Hydra. You are wrong." Pierce muttered. "Oh, you are so wrong," he shouted, this time looking around the room. "You think this ends here? With my death? It doesn't." "He is still out there," Pierce announced. "Who is?" the captain asked, already dreading the answer. "A god, Captain. Hydra's god," he said, looking at Steve before turning back toward Ethan. "Someone who dwarfs even your power." What followed the proclamation was laughter, Fury's shrill, harsh, and triumphant cackle. Natasha could be seen stifling a chuckle herself. Ethan, on the other hand, simply stared down at Pierce, his expression unreadable. "Haha, what do you find? What's so funny about this?" Pierce growled, his voice laced with venom. Ethan walked toward him and dropped to one knee, meeting his eye level. "Him, the war curse," he said, tilting his head to the right where Kitsune manifested a vivid illusion of the entity. "What a joke. I was the one who killed your god when I was a prepubescent child." At his words, the illusion of the war curse collapsed and began dissipating into nothingness. "It was me, Pierce. I was the one who forced you to trigger the general alarm for all Hydra forces," he finished, his voice cold and steady as he stood back up. Pierce, despite his fanatical devotion to the cause, seemed sane enough to grasp the gravity of what had happened. For the first time, he looked truly defeated. He scanned the room, then looked back at Ethan. "I chose my path, you chose the way of a hero." He began, his eyes drifting toward the revolver tucked inside the desk at his side. "But not anymore. You deviated from a hero's path. What you have done today, this world has a long memory. They will remember it and keep reminding everyone," Pierce continued as he shifted toward the desk. "They found you amusing for a while, the people of this era. But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, and die trying. In spite of everything you have done for them, eventually, they will hate you. Look around this very room, they already." Pierce lowered his head as if in final surrender, but in the next second, he moved with surprising agility for a man of his age. "Fear you," he finished, snapping the gun up and pointing it directly at Ethan. Bang. But it was Fury who fired first. With that, the final head of Hydra, Alexander Goodwin Pierce, lay dead with a bullet in his skull. Ethan looked at Fury, his expression calm. "Bullets wouldn't have harmed me." Fury walked past him, his black trench coat billowing in the wind as he stared out at the massive dome enclosing the river. "Is that so?" The director glanced back at Romanoff and Hill. At his subtle gesture, they began to exit the room alongside the councilman. The captain lingered, looking at Pierce's lifeless body for a moment longer before he and Bucky also made their way outside. Now, the room contained only Fury and Ethan. He was right, you know. They will hate you, or they will fear you, especially now that every SHIELD file has been uploaded to the internet. Fury spoke, his gaze fixed on the horizon. You will no longer be seen as the guy who just heals. They will come for you. A faction of the US government was already hunting you, we just handed them the best damn ammunition imaginable. It doesn't matter, Ethan replied, walking up to stand beside him. Fury looked at him, genuinely confused. Doesn't matter, he questioned. Ethan released a heavy sigh, his mind flashing back to the carnage in Fairview for a brief second. He turned toward Fury, his eyes hard and certain. We can be the good guys, or we can be the guys who save the world. We can't be both. He finished his sentence just as he activated his technique to teleport out of the room. 1 week later. Elizabeth Bess Adams. She has been serving as the United States Secretary of State for only a few months. Following the death of former Secretary Vincent Marsh in a suspicious plane crash, President Conrad Dalton had personally requested her, his former mentee at the CIA, to serve in his cabinet. As she was not a natural politician, Elizabeth had frequently clashed with White House Chief of Staff Russell Jackson in the past. However, at this moment, they were both in her office alongside the rest of her staff, waiting for a call from the former director of SHIELD, Nick Fury. Her chief of staff, Nadine Tolliver, brought her a fresh glass of water. Bess nodded, appreciating the gesture. She looked around the room and saw grim faces everywhere. This atmosphere reminded her of another time, 9/11. The environment was hauntingly similar, the same heavy silence and the same set of grim expressions on everyone present. Jay Whitman, her policy advisor, stood at the edge of the room with his back resting against the wall. Blake Moran, Elizabeth's personal assistant and coordinator, sat on the staff sofa, repeatedly checking the computer for the anticipated call. Daisy Grant, her press secretary, paced around the room while nervously chewing her nails. Matt Mahoney, her head of speechwriting, sat in unusual silence, likely drafting the words she would soon have to deliver to a terrified nation. Finally, there was Mike Barnow, her unconventional political consultant. Mike sighed and stood up abruptly. Fine, I'll say it. This is crazy. What is it now, Barnow? Russell, the president's chief of staff, demanded. A fucking meteor fell from the sky onto Washington. A meteor, Bess, Mike reiterated, looking directly at her. And the guy who did it, we don't know where he is. Forget that, we don't even know what he is. The people who presumably did know turned out to be half composed of Nazis. He gestured toward the blank computer screen where they awaited the call. And the other half seems more interested in making us wait all day than giving us simple answers. I thought 9/11 was bad, but this trumps it by a wide margin. This is all just crazy, he repeated once more. None seemed to counter him, they all knew the truth. They were indeed in a precarious situation. It had been a week since the Hydra resurgence had taken the world by surprise, but as soon as they emerged, they were squashed back down, almost as if by design. Her gaze shifted toward the office television, where the morning news was playing. Turn up the sound, she said, and Blake did it immediately. The lead, breaking news. This is a CNN special report. I'm Wolf Blitzer, and we are coming to you live from the nation's capital, where the dust, and the terror, is only just beginning to settle. It has been 7 days since the day of the falling star. 7 days since the sky over the Potomac turned blood red and the laws of physics were rewritten in front of our very eyes. We are now standing on the precipice of a political and existential crisis unlike anything seen in the history of this republic. In just a few hours, the White House is expected to break its silence. Press Secretary Daisy Grant will step to the podium to offer the official executive stance on the men at the center of this storm, Ethan Park. The panel introduction. Joining our panel tonight to help us parse the ethical and legal wreckage is Dr. Henry McCord. Dr. McCord is a former Marine, a renowned professor of ethics, and, as many of you know, the husband of Secretary of State Elizabeth McCord. Also with us is Congresswoman Kayla Wallace. Representative Wallace, you have spent the last week on the floor of the House calling this event, and I use your words, the greatest threat to American sovereignty since the British burned this city in 1814. Henry, Kayla, thank you for being here. Thank you for having us, they answered in unison. Before we get into the debate, let's look at the images that have been burned into the global psyche. These clips, captured by tourists and dashcams, show the moment the first projectile, what experts are still struggling to classify as a meteor, descended directly onto the deck of a SHIELD helicarrier. Look at that footage. You can see the structural failure of the multi-billion-dollar helicarrier in less than 3 seconds. And then, there is the black dome. Our satellites couldn't penetrate it. Our drones couldn't fly through it. For 4 hours, a 5-mile radius of the Potomac River simply vanished from the map. Live, National News Network exclusive. Wolf Blitzer *. The question remains, did Ethan Park save Washington, D.C. from Hydra's resurgence, or did he simply remind us that we are completely defenseless against his whims? Congresswoman, I'll start with you. The president is calling this a failure of Project Insight. What are your thoughts? Congresswoman asterisk. Let's not stand on tradition, Wolf. Call this what it is, the Park problem. Our president seems to have lost his backbone, but the American people haven't. Ethan Park has been a threat to this sovereign nation since the day he first ignored a congressional subpoena. We should have declared him a domestic terrorist then and there. And the evidence is finally catching up to the myth. In light of the massive SHIELD data leak intended to expose Hydra, we've unmasked a trove of information SHIELD fought to keep buried. Take a look at your screen. This is Subject 2718. Wolf continued. A picture of teen Ethan, 14 years old, showed on the screen. Wolf Blitzer asterisk. That black and red blur captured on satellite footage near the third plane during the 9/11 attacks. SHIELD's analysts have confirmed that was Subject 2718, Ethan Park. We are looking at a suspected, direct involvement in the darkest day in our history. A/N, so how was the chapter? Chapter 77, Consequences, Part. Domain expansion, mandatory headcount. Link, p@trian.com/arson. Congresswomen asterisk. It's a pattern, Wolf. For last decade, every time Ethan Park is cited, a catastrophe follows. A school collapse in New Mexico. A hospital fire in Houston. A bridge in Pittsburgh reduced to rubble. We are tracking over 100 coincidences where Park was at the epicenter of multi-billion-dollar property damage and staggering loss of life. Congresswoman asterisk. Look at the Fairview massacre from just a few months ago. 136 people are dead, and we still have no idea what truly happened to them because Ethan Park flatly refuses to cooperate with the proper authorities. He was spotted again at Fairview Hospital precisely at the time of the massacre, not as a savior, mind you. Wolf Blitzer asterisk. But the most damning file in this massive data leak concerns December 26, 2004. The Indian Ocean tsunami. SHIELD's own facial recognition data places Park on the Sumatra coastline just minutes before the initial surge. We are talking about a cataclysm that claimed nearly 1,000 lives. Congresswoman Wallace asterisk. Exactly, Wolf. Their own analysts confirmed that the 9.3 magnitude earthquake wasn't merely a natural shift in tectonic plates. In light of this new information, the fact that Park apparently possesses the power to cause destruction on a planetary scale, the question we must ask is, what is stopping him from doing it again? And more importantly, who is going to stop him if he tries? Wolf Blitzer asterisk. Those are some very pointed questions, Congresswoman. Hopefully, we will receive those answers from the White House shortly. Press Secretary Daisy Grant will soon step to the podium to offer the official executive stance on the men at the center of this storm, Ethan Park. Now, let's hear from Dr. Henry McCord. You are a professor of theology, so let's start there. I want to read a quote that has been circulating among a minority of people in our republic who support this extreme intervention. Asterisk, the only way to combat evil, true evil, is with extreme violence. Take away the choice to be evil. Make the consequences so unimaginably horrifying that no one has the choice but to be a moral, ethical human being. If a few have to give up their humanity to attain that, there is no greater cause. Asterisk, what are your thoughts on that, Dr. McCord? Dr. Henry McCord asterisk. Who decides the line between legality and actual evil, Ethan Park? We have to realize that this is the exact reasoning used by authoritarians to justify their rule. A democratic system, where the people are at least somewhat culpable for their actions, cannot sustain such a regime, at least not while remaining a democracy. Once state-sanctioned violence of that magnitude against the population is normalized, there is nothing stopping whoever is at the helm from rewriting every rule and simply suppressing all opposition as evil. Essentially, the fantasy that horrible consequences prevent crimes is just that, a fantasy. It disintegrates on contact with reality because it can only exist in a binary world where things are either perfectly lawful or not. In reality, countless people are in jail or paying fines that any half-decent lawyer could have avoided. With that in mind, I have to ask, would you really accept unimaginably horrible consequences being inflicted on people who can never be certain of their guilt? Especially knowing it might be you in their place next time, simply because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Back in Elizabeth McCord's office. He has a way with words, doesn't he? Mike B. commented, watching the broadcast. Russell seemed to agree, nodding in silent approval. He didn't explicitly disagree with the given quote, yet he presented his own point of view regardless. Your husband has a future as a politician, Elizabeth, Russell added, looking toward Bess. You'll have to convince him of that. Close it, Bess said. It's time. The TV was shut off, and on the other terminal, the SHIELD logo flickered to life. The rest of her staff scattered, leaving only her and Russell remaining in front of the massive screen as Nick Fury appeared. Madam Secretary, good evening, Fury started. Russell, you're here too, he noted. Russell looked back at her. What? No, good evening for me, Nick. Before even receiving a reply, he stood up and growled at the screen, "We've been waiting for 30 minutes. I apologize for the delay. As you already know, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been dissolved. I've been busy picking up the pieces left behind. Regardless, I am here now, so let's get this meeting started," Fury added. Elizabeth sat up straight at his words. "Fury, a new committee has been formed specifically to compel Ethan Park to testify before the U.S. Senate, the Committee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities." Seeing the lack of surprise on Fury's face, Russell and Bess exchanged wary glances. "And we want Ethan Park to respect the sovereignty of this nation and be present to answer for his actions," Russell finished for her. "Well, if you want my opinion, that is a bad idea," Fury started, but Bess cut him off. "I don't. What I want from you is to make sure he is there. You have a way to contact him, yes." She knew the rumors. Ethan's teleportation kunai were famous in the intelligence community, and as a former CIA analyst, she knew exactly how he operated. "Park has refused such subpoenas before," Fury countered. "Even if I tell him, what makes you think he will accept this time?" Russell and Elizabeth exchanged one final look. The whole nation will be made aware of this in a few hours. If Ethan Park doesn't show up before this committee, he will be declared a domestic terrorist and hunted down. You tell him that. Then the call ended. In a different time, a different life, Calvin Broadus Jr. would have chosen the path of hip-hop, christening himself Snoop Dogg. He would have become a legendary artist, defining West Coast G-Funk with a laid-back, smooth delivery that became the gold standard of the 1990s. But that was another life. In this timeline, his younger days led him on a pilgrimage to Vatican City, where he found a higher calling. Now, he stood before a massive audience in St. Peter's Square. Father Broadus preached with his signature rhythmic cadence, offering the church's perspective on the Day of the Falling Star, as the world had come to call Ethan Park's intervention. Father Broadus adjusted his silk vestments, the Vatican sun reflecting off his shades as he leaned into the mic with that unmistakable, rhythmic drawl. "Aight, check it, nephew. Yeah, let me lay it out for ya, real smooth like. You hear people talking about who wrote the good book, saying it's just some random cats with pens. Nah, man, let me drop some knowledge on who really put it down. We talkin' about 40 different G's, you dig? 39 Jews and 1 Gentile. And check the timeline, they were operatin' over a span of 1500 years. That means some of 'em were puffin' on that Holy Spirit centuries before the others even touched the scene. They never had a chance to link up, never had a group chat, nothin'. They were spread out across 3 different continents, speaking 3 different languages. But check the play, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, there's a singular unity of thought. A straight line, no tangles." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, melodic hum that vibrated through the square. "That's a mathematical impossibility, for real, unless you got the big boss upstairs, the God Almighty, Provident, the inspiration. You can't even get 20 people in a room today to write a paragraph about the same topic without somebody catching an attitude and disagreeing. Yet this book stands as one. It's the ultimate collaboration, orchestrated from the highest level. Preach." Father Broadus smoothed out his white and gold robe, leaning into the gold-plated microphone with a heavy, solemn gaze that swept across the thousands gathered in the square. "But we ain't gathered here today for the usual Sunday service, now are we? Nah, nephew. You know exactly why we're standing on this holy ground. We talkin' about that falling star. Ring a bell?" "Yeah, I thought so." He paused as a low, anxious murmur rippled through the crowd like a bass line. He nodded slowly, his voice dropping into a deep, velvety growl. "The devil has touched down on the green earth once again, you dig? This Ethan Park, he just showed the whole world that if you ain't on his level, you're straight up powerless. You're just dust in the wind when he decides to flip the script. Now, some of you smart cats out there, you done read those files they leaked. You seen the receipts. There ain't no doubt about it, we talkin' about a cold-blooded serial killer. This man been out here braggin' about takin' lives like it's a game, loud and proud with it. He ain't just hidin' in the shadows, nah, he's professed it. He's confessed it. When he made the star fall, he looked the world in the eye and told us he was a demon. And when a man tells you who he is, you better believe him the first time. Now, speakin' of serial killers, y'all know about Rosalind Dyer, right?" The crowd hollered back in agreement. "In December of 2013, just last year, for real, I got a request for a lil dip in the holy water from the Chowchilla Women's Facility. Rosalind Dyer wanted that baptism, trying to keep her soul from that eternal barbecue down below. The congregation gave a big amen to that. When I met her, I asked her straight up if she did all those cold-blooded things, 'cause I was feelin' beyond disgusted. She was shook, nephew, real talk, she was. She started looking for the exit real quick like. I had to block the lane. And in the end, I looked her in the eye while I baptized her. I truly believed if she found the big guy upstairs, she could be saved." Father Broadus paused, looking at the crowd with solemnly. But do y'all know what happened to her? She got done dirty, butchered like some animal, nah, worse than that. And did y'all know the folks from S.H.I.E.L.D., the ones who leaked those files, and I'm using their lingo now, were 100% certain it was Park who took her off the board? Like I told you. He is that bruh. If he wanted you out of there, he is gonna do it himself, on feet a straight-up demon. The congregation shouted back, clinging to Father's each word. I'm tellin' you, I will be so relieved for the community, man, once this demon is sent back to hell, cause he is over here torturing people on the regular. I ain't gonna lie to you, man, something is seriously wrong with him. Cause that right there. That's not human, man. You are not a regular man. You are the devil himself. So from what I hear, those files prove every bit of it to be true. He is a serial killer, and he is a demon in human form. Sermons and proclamations like these, though less eccentric, echoed across the globe. There were those who had been personally restored to health by Ethan, and others saved by his hand from the terror of curses, yet they remained a silent minority. Their gratitude was easily drowned out by the dense fog of outrage that surged following the White House's official stance against Park. Los Angeles *. Inside a luxury penthouse situated directly above the high-end nightclub Lux, the space was an expansive testament to opulence, featuring a grand piano, a private bar, a vast library, and a balcony overlooking the sprawling city lights. A man clad only in an expensive silk red robe stood before a 65-inch flat-screen television, intently watching a news of the Day of the Falling Star. Oh, me, he murmured aloud, a playful glint in his eyes. Humans like you haven't been born in 10 millennia. He brought his hand close to the screen, tracing the displayed image of Ethan's face. What is it you truly desire, Ethan Park? A/N, so how was the chapter? Chapter 78, Executive Order. Link, p@trian.com/arson. On the other side of the city, in the private residence of Mazikeen, the demon who had followed Lucifer Morningstar through the gates of hell, and Eve, the first woman, the two were watching the same coverage of the Day of the Falling Star. On left side of the screen the executive order given by White House was being displayed. The White House. Office of the President. For immediate release May 1, 2014. Executive Order 13619, Mandatory Appearance and Testimony of Ethan Park. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including the National Emergencies Act and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1. Purpose *** in light of the catastrophic events transpiring in the capital of the nation, Washington, D.C. on April 24, 2014, involving the use of unidentified high-yield weaponry and the subversion of national security assets, the United States government requires immediate clarity regarding the capabilities and intentions of the individual known as Ethan Park. Section 2. Mandate of appearance *** Ethan Park is hereby compelled and commanded to appear before a joint extraordinary session of the Senate and House Committees on Intelligence and Armed Services. Location * United States Capitol, Senate Chamber. Date, time * May 4, 2014, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Section 3. Scope of inquiry *** the subject shall provide sworn testimony regarding a. His role in the destabilization of the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division, S.H.I.E.L.D. b. The origin and nature of the localized seismic and thermal anomalies colloquially termed the Falling Star. c. Allegations of unrecorded high-grade incidents involving phenomena dating back up to 2001. Section 4. Enforcement ** failure to comply with this order in person and in a timely manner will result in the immediate classification of Ethan Park as an unlawful combatant and an imminent threat to national security. Under such designation, the Department of Defense is authorized to utilize all necessary means, including the mobilization of specialized tactical assets, to ensure the safety of the Republic. Section 5. General provisions ** this order is not intended to, and does not, create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States. Conrad Dalton. The White House. May 1, 2014. On the right side, Anchor Desk, Breaking News Graphic. Anchor * Good evening. This is a CNN special report. I'm Wolf Blitzer. We begin tonight with a historic ultimatum from the Oval Office. President Conrad Dalton has just signed Executive Order No. 13619, a move that effectively places the scrutiny of the entire world on Ethan Park. In a direct response to the Day of the Falling Star that decimated the Triskelion and left the Potomac coastline in a state of shock, the White House, they are demanding cooperation. Anchor *. The order, released just moments ago, compels Mr. Park to appear before a joint extraordinary session of Congress, in front of the Committee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities, this coming Sunday, May 4. This is not a standard hearing. The President has invoked the National Emergencies Act, demanding that Park answer for the destabilization of S.H.I.E.L.D. and provide an explanation for the unidentified high-yield weaponry, the meteors, that fell upon our nation's capital. Image of the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Anchor asterisk. But it is Section 4 of this order that is sending shockwaves through the legal and international communities. Read it here on your screen. Asterisk, failure to comply will result in the immediate classification of Ethan Park as an unlawful combatant and an imminent threat to national security. Asterisk. In plain English, if Ethan Park does not walk into that Senate chamber at 9 a.m. on Sunday, he will be branded a terrorist and an enemy of the state. The Department of Defense has been authorized to use all necessary means, a phrase that carries the weight of the United States military, to neutralize him. Anchor asterisk. The White House is also digging into Park's past, citing allegations of unrecorded incidents dating as far back as 2001. Tonight, the question on every American's mind is whether Park will submit to the laws of the country, or if we are witnessing the birth of a conflict the likes of which this republic has never faced. Our senior White House correspondent, Daisy Grant, is standing by at the North Lawn with more on this developing story. Mazikeen paced the living room, her movements predatory. In a flash of fury, she hurled a shuriken. It embedded itself in the screen, instantly killing the broadcast. Forget the news. All of that is far beyond us, May spat. She looked softly toward Eve, who was still wearing yesterday's pajamas, clutching a tissue box used to wipe away a constant stream of snot and tears. Seeing Eve's state, a look of unadulterated rage crossed May's face. I am going to kill Lucifer, she told the sobbing woman. I mean it. No, you can't hurt him, because I love him, Eve replied, dabbing at her eyes. The breakup had happened only yesterday, following an epiphany by the Lord of the Underworld. He had realized he hated himself. I want him back. I just don't understand why he would say he doesn't love himself when he's with me, Eve sniffled. What does that even mean? Maze looked at Eve with a hidden longing before composing herself and sitting beside her. It means he's an idiot, which is typical for Lucifer. He doesn't realize how lucky he is. Thanks, Eve said, turning to her. But how do I get him back? Maze sighed. Lucifer is like any other man. He wants what he can't have. Okay. I can do that. I need to show him that I'm fine. That I'm fine without him, Eve answered with a choked gasp as she stood up. I can do that, she choked out again. Okay, maybe I can't. Not unless you help me, please. In the old days, I could just possess your body and help you, May said without thinking. Seeing the shock on Eve's face, she quickly clarified. Demons used to be able to possess humans, but only those who had just died. Then Lucifer forbade it. Why? Eve asked. Above my pay grade. It must have pissed off someone in the Silver City, Maze replied. So, we have to do this the old-fashioned way. And what's that? Eve asked between sniffs. You're going to get your shit together, Maze clarified, and then you're going to rub it in Lucifer's face just how much you don't need him. At those words, Eve's lips finally curved into a small, determined smile. P.S. The next chapter will be uploaded on schedule. To clarify my process, I typically write each chapter in two smaller parts, roughly 1,000 words each, and then upload them to Webnovel by combining those two parts into one full chapter.